Rimmeru go back in time by Rimu-chi. Preparation for second encounter. The sun hung high in the sky over Falmouth, casting its golden rays onto the kingdom. Inside the grand palace, the mood was anything but sunny. In the king's meeting room, King Edmaris sat at the head of an opulent table, his face pale but resolute. To his left sat his younger brother, Edmaris, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Surrounding them were 9 nobles, each dressed in the finest robes and exuding an air of superiority. The tension in the room was palpable as the king prepared to speak. Edmaris cleared his throat, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. I have summoned you here today to announce my decision regarding the future of Falmouth. The nobles leaned in, curious yet cautious. Edmaris paused for a moment before delivering the bombshell. I will abdicate the throne, he declared, his tone unwavering, and pass it to someone more worthy of leading this kingdom. The room exploded into chaos. 8 of the nobles, their faces a mix of disbelief and anger, began shouting over one another, their protests filling the air. This is outrageous, bellowed the first noble, his round face red with anger. A king does not simply abandon his throne. Your Majesty, have you gone mad? Shouted the second noble, slamming his fist on the table. This decision will lead to turmoil. You can't just hand over the throne to someone else. The third noble added. This kingdom needs stability, not chaos. Think of the lineage. Your son must inherit the crown. Argued the fourth noble, his voice laced with indignation. A ruler's duty is to persevere, not give up. Cried the fifth noble, shaking his head in disbelief. This will weaken our position on the world stage. The sixth noble interjected, his hands gesturing wildly. What kind of king abandons his throne during such a critical time? The seventh noble sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. Your Majesty, this is not only reckless but utterly shameful. The eighth noble declared, his voice trembling with anger. Amidst the cacophony of voices, Edmaris leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. Unlike the others, his voice was calm but filled with suspicion as he addressed his brother. This isn't like you, Edmaris. Abdication. Passing the throne. When did you start caring about doing the right thing? And what happened to that confidant of yours, the one you trusted before the attack on the monster nation? The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the king. Edmaris hesitated, his expression darkening. That confidant is no more. Edmaris's brow furrowed. No more. What does that mean? What happened? Edmaris sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. If you had seen what I saw, Edmaris, you would understand. You would do the same. One of the older nobles, a man known for his wisdom and calm demeanor, broke the silence. Your Majesty, what did you see? We have heard rumors, but nothing concrete. Tell us, what exactly happened? The king froze, dread washing over him. Diablo's visit was still fresh in his mind, his crimson eyes an overwhelming aura etched into his memory. Edmaris knew that if he spoke out of line, if even one detail of his account didn't align with Diablo's version, it could spell doom for everyone in the room. After a long pause, he sighed heavily. This is dangerous to speak of, but if you must know, I saw the storm dragon, Veldora, with my own eyes. The room erupted once more, though this time the voices were filled with fear rather than anger. The storm dragon. One noble exclaimed, his face draining of color. Impossible. Another stammered. That's just a rumor, isn't it? Rumors are one thing, but to hear it from the king himself, whispered a third, his voice trembling. Edmaris raised his hand, silencing them. Not only did I see the storm dragon, but I also witnessed the ruler of Tempest, Rimmeru Tempest, stand against him. He fought to stop Veldora's rampage, and defeated him. The nobles were stunned into silence, their faces pale and their hands trembling. The weight of the king's words sank in, and the room grew colder with each passing second. Edmaris, however, refused to back down. Even if that's true, we can still fight. We are Falmouth. We have a strong army and resources. We can rebuild and strike back against Tempest. Edmaris shook his head, his voice firm. No, Edmaris. It's futile. No matter how many soldiers we send, no matter how strong our forces are, our chances of victory against Tempest are zero. Absolutely zero. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. One of them finally spoke, his voice hesitant. Then, what do you propose, Your Majesty? Edmaris took a deep breath. Normally, I would pass the throne to my son. But he is far too young to rule. Instead, I will give the throne to Yume, the champion. The room exploded into chaos once again, the nobles, protests growing louder and more desperate. A commoner. This is an insult to our kingdom. He may be a warrior, but he is no king. Has the world gone mad? A barbarian on the throne of Falmouth. Edmaris raised his voice, silencing the room. Is the only choice. He is capable, and most importantly, he has a good relationship with Rimmeru Tempest. Under his leadership, we can ensure peace with the monster nation. Another noble stood, his face red with anger. And what about reparations to Tempest? Are we to bankrupt ourselves for these monsters? The others nodded in agreement, their outrage clear. If you want to pay them, use your own wealth. One noble sneered. The king's expression hardened. If I do not give the throne to and pay for what we did to Tempest, we will become a vassal state under their rule. If that happens, our people will be in constant danger. I cannot allow that. The room fell silent once more, the nobles stunned by the king's words. For the first time, they saw a man who was not driven by greed or self-interest, but by a genuine desire to protect his people. Edmaris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. When did the greedy King Edmaris become a king who cares about his people? Edmaris sighed, his expression tired but sincere. There are many things we cannot understand until something extraordinary happens. Before anyone could respond, the doors to the meeting room burst open, and a soldier rushed in, his face pale and his breathing ragged. Your Majesty! The soldier exclaimed, bowing deeply. I have a message from the guild. The nobles erupted in anger once more. How dare you interrupt this meeting? This better be important. Edmaris raised his hand, silencing them. He turned to the soldier, his expression serious. Speak. What is this message? The soldier hesitated for a moment, then spoke, his voice trembling. It's about Tempest. The room fell silent, the air heavy with tension. Whatever the message was, it could change everything. Your Majesty, the soldier repeated, his voice trembling. The ruler of the monster nation, Rimmeru Tempest, has declared himself a demon lord. The room fell silent. The announcement hit like a thunderbolt, leaving the nobles in stunned disbelief. Slowly, the silence gave way to murmurs, and then to outright chaos. A demon lord. One noble exclaimed, his voice cracking with fear. This is madness. That monster dares to claim such a title. Another sneered. He'll bring nothing but ruin. I knew that creature was dangerous. A third noble said, his fists clenched. But this is unprecedented. As the nobles processed the news, one of them, a man with sharp eyes and a sly smile, leaned back in his chair. Perhaps this is good news, he said, his tone dripping with malice. If Rimmeru Tempest has declared himself a demon lord, the other demon lords will not take that lightly. They'll see him as a threat and deal with him themselves. Another noble, equally cunning, smirked. Indeed. If we're lucky, one of the other demon lords might kill him, and maybe even the storm dragon along the way. The others chuckled, their laughter filled with mockery and cruelty. Yes, said one of them. Let those monsters fight among themselves. Rimmeru Tempest's days are numbered. The king sat silently, his expression grim. Finally, he sighed deeply, drawing the attention of the room. This is not going to end well, he muttered, almost to himself. Edmaris frowned and turned to his brother. What do you mean, Edmaris? Why do you sound so certain? Before the king could answer, the doors to the chamber burst open again. Another soldier rushed in, his face as pale as the first. He knelt before the king, catching his breath. Your Majesty, the soldier said hurriedly, I bring more news from the guild. Edmaris, growing impatient, barked, what now? Speak. The soldier gulped and continued, his voice trembling. The 10 great demon lords, they have reorganized. They now call themselves the Octagram. Additionally, demon lords Carrion and Frey have stepped down from their positions. The room erupted into murmurs once more, the nobles visibly shaken by the revelation. This is alarming, one noble muttered, his hands trembling. But it's not our problem, is it? Let the demon lords sort out their own affairs. The soldier shook his head. That's not all, Your Majesty. Edmaris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What else? The soldier hesitated, then delivered the next blow. Demon Lord Clayman has been defeated. He was killed by none other than Demon Lord Rimmeru Tempest. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The weight of the news pressed down on everyone present. Even the most arrogant nobles found themselves at a loss for words. Finally, one noble spoke, his voice shaky. Defeated Clayman. But Clayman was, how could Rimmeru Tempest achieve such a thing? The soldier straightened himself and added, Rimmeru Tempest has been recognized as a proper demon lord. He is no longer an unofficial one. The reaction in the room was instant. 8 of the nobles began speaking at once, their voices a mix of panic, denial, and anger. This cannot be. He's just a Majin. How could he defeat Clayman? An official demon lord. This is outrageous. Edmaris, his brow furrowed, turned to the soldier. What do we know about this Rimmeru Tempest? What are his plans? The soldier shook his head. We don't know much beyond this. But his rise as a demon lord is causing massive shifts across the world. As the room descended into further chaos, one noble stood and slammed his hands on the table. I have a solution to this demon lord issue. The other nobles turned to him, curious despite their fear. What solution? One asked. The noble smiled confidently. We must summon Lightspeed hero Masayuki. He can defeat this so-called demon lord. I'm sure of it. Another noble nodded in agreement. Yes, Masayuki. The hero who moves so fast, his enemies can't even see his attacks. I've heard tales of his strength. He's defeated countless enemies with ease, another added, his tone brimming with hope. If anyone can deal with Rimmeru Tempest, it's him. Exactly, the first noble continued, his voice growing more excited. We'll inform Masayuki about this new demon lord. We'll tell him how cruel and dangerous Rimmeru Tempest is. Heroes are supposed to kill demon lords, after all. Let Rimmeru see why Masayuki is called the Lightspeed hero. The room began to buzz with renewed energy as the nobles hyped themselves up, ignoring the grim reality of the situation. Suddenly, the doors burst open once more. A third soldier entered, his face even paler than the others. He stumbled into the room, dropping to his knees. What now? One of the nobles demanded, irritated by the constant interruptions. What could possibly be worse than what we've already heard? The soldier looked up at the king, his voice trembling. Your Majesty, this is bad. Rimmeru Tempest, the new demon lord, has gained the title, Chaos Creator. The room fell deathly silent. That's not all, the soldier continued, his voice barely above a whisper. He has also been given the title of Strongest Demon Lord. And according to the guild's latest information, Guy Crimson himself has recognized Rimmeru as the leader of the Demon Lords' Council. The words hit the room like a hammer. The 9 nobles and Edmaris sat frozen, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. Even the king, who had braced himself for the worst, looked visibly shaken. Leader of the Demon Lords, one noble muttered, his voice barely audible. This can't be real. Another noble buried his face in his hands. We're doomed. There's no escaping this. Edmaris, for once, was speechless. His usual bravado had vanished, replaced by a deep, gnawing fear. Edmaris finally broke the silence. You've heard the reports. Rimmeru Tempest is no ordinary demon lord. He became demon lord because we invaded his nation. Because of us. His words hung heavy in the air. The nobles, despite their fear, began to argue once more, their greed and arrogance overriding their reason. We can't give up our wealth and power. One noble shouted. The people will survive. They always do. Exactly, another agreed. This is about preserving our status. Let the peasants fend for themselves. But what about Masayuki? A third noble chimed in. This is the perfect time to call him. He'll defeat Rimmeru Tempest and restore order. Yes, another noble nodded enthusiastically. Heroes are meant to kill demon lords. Let Masayuki kill this demon lord. The room filled with their delusional chatter, the nobles hyping up Masayuki as if he were a godsend. They ignored the reality of Rimmeru's overwhelming power, choosing instead to place their hopes in a hero they had never even met. Edmaris sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping. You fools, he muttered under his breath. Edmaris turned to him. What are you thinking, brother? The king looked up, his eyes tired but resolute. I highly doubt that even a god could defeat Rimmeru Tempest. The room fell silent once more, the king's words cutting through their delusions like a blade. Despite his grim declaration, the nobles continued to cling to their fantasies, unwilling to face the truth. Third person, Hinata Sakaguchi. Hinata Sakaguchi sat quietly in her quarters, the room lit only by the dim light of a lantern. The faint sound of snowflakes brushing against the windowpane added to the silence, yet her mind was anything but calm. She stared at the set of armor neatly arranged before her, her hands clenched into fists on her lap. The summons she had received earlier was still fresh in her mind. Rimmeru Tempest, she whispered, the name heavy on her tongue. This was no ordinary task. The monster she had once faced, the one she had underestimated, had become a force she couldn't ignore. Last time, she had tried to kill him, convinced that he was an enemy of humanity. Yet, that battle had ended in her defeat, and now things had escalated far beyond what she had ever imagined. Hinata's expression darkened as she recalled her conversation with Luminous Valentine, the true demon lord she served. Luminous had been surprisingly clear with her orders. For someone as prideful as Luminous to issue such a warning, the situation must be dire. But even worse than the words themselves was the lingering suspicion in Hinata's mind. Rumors had reached her, whispers that her former mentor, Shizu Izawa, might still be alive. That alone was enough to unsettle her. Could it be true? If so, why hadn't Shizu contacted her? What role did Rimmeru play in all of this? The questions were endless, and the lack of answers only deepened her unease. Hinata exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she began to don her armor. The polished metal reflected her troubled expression, a far cry from the confident, composed leader her subordinates were used to seeing. Get it together, she muttered to herself. This is no time for doubt. But doubt was precisely what plagued her. Rimmeru had not only survived her attempt to kill him but had gone on to establish himself as a demon lord, a title not easily earned. This time, he had challenged her directly, a move that felt both bold and unnerving. What kind of power did he wield now? Could she truly face him again, knowing how their last encounter had ended? Once her armor was secured, Hinata stood and looked at herself in the mirror. Her piercing gaze stared back, but even she could see the faint shadow of uncertainty in her eyes. She hated it. She hated not being in control. But there was no turning back now. With a final breath, she grabbed her sword and stepped outside into the cold night. The snow was falling steadily, blanketing Ruberios in a serene yet oppressive silence. Her horse awaited her, its breath visible in the frosty air. As she mounted it, she glanced back at her quarters one last time before setting off. The snow crunched beneath her horse's hooves as she rode through the winding paths leading out of Ruberios. The chill in the air matched her mood, cold, tense, and heavy. She pulled her cloak tighter around herself, her thoughts swirling uncontrollably. Why did he challenge me directly? What does he want? The image of Rimmeru's calm yet piercing gaze flashed in her mind, and she grit her teeth. She couldn't show weakness, not now. Yet, beneath her stern exterior, a part of her wondered if she was walking into a trap. What if this was all a ploy to humiliate her further? And what of Shizu? If there was even a chance that her sensei was alive, could she afford to ignore it? Hinata's thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of hooves in the distance. At first, she thought it was just the echo of her own horse, but the rhythm was off, too many beats, too close together. She slowed her horse and glanced over her shoulder, narrowing her eyes as the shapes of 4 riders emerged from the snowfall. It didn't take long for her to recognize them. Arnold, Bacchus, Ritus, and Fritz, 4 of her most trusted subordinates. They were riding hard to catch up to her, their expressions determined. Hinata pulled her horse to a stop, waiting for them to close the distance. As they approached, she raised an eyebrow, her tone sharp. What are you doing here? Arnold, ever the dependable one, was the first to speak. We're not letting you go alone, Commander. This mission is far too dangerous. Hinata's frown deepened. This is my responsibility. You don't need to involve yourselves. Fritz nodded firmly. With all due respect, Commander, you're our leader. It's our duty to support you, no matter the risk. Bacchus, the most outspoken of the group, smirked. What kind of subordinates would we be if we let you face a demon lord by yourself? Besides, someone has to keep you from doing anything reckless. Hinata's glare softened slightly, though she still wasn't convinced. This isn't a battle you can just charge into without understanding the risks. Rimmeru Tempest is unlike any opponent we've faced before. Ritus, always the voice of reason, spoke up. We know the risks, Commander. But we've made our decision. You can't stop us from coming with you. Hinata sighed, realizing there was no point in arguing. They were as stubborn as she was. Fine, she said reluctantly. But stay out of trouble. I don't need any distractions. The 4 nodded, their resolve unwavering. With that, they fell in line behind her, and the group continued their journey toward Tempest. The snowfall grew heavier as they rode, the white landscape stretching endlessly in all directions. The air was silent except for the rhythmic sound of hooves and the occasional snort from the horses. Despite their presence, Hinata couldn't shake the weight on her shoulders. Her mind wandered back to her first encounter with Rimmeru. She had been so certain of her victory then, so confident in her abilities. But the reality had been a harsh one. Rimmeru had not only survived but had managed to outmaneuver her at every turn. And now, he had grown into something far greater. As they rode, Bacchus broke the silence. You've been awfully quiet, Commander. Nervous. Hinata shot him a sharp look. Focus on the task at hand, Bacchus. He chuckled but didn't press further. Arnold, riding closer to her, spoke softly. We'll handle whatever comes our way. You don't have to carry this burden alone. Hinata's grip on her reins tightened. I'm not afraid of Rimmeru, she said, though the words felt hollow. I just need to understand what he wants. The journey stretched on, the snow continuing to fall as the group pressed forward. The closer they got to Tempest, the heavier the air seemed to grow. Hinata couldn't tell if it was the weight of her own thoughts or something more, but the unease in her chest refused to fade. In the dimly lit room, the only source of light was the warm flicker of the fireplace. The shadows cast by the fire danced ominously on the walls, reflecting the mood of those gathered. Grand Bel Razzo sat in his high-backed chair, the patriarch of the Razzo family exuding an air of calm authority. His granddaughter, Mariabel Razzo, sat on his lap, silent, her piercing gaze observing the room like a hawk. Damrata, the loyal and composed merchant, stood to the side, his expression unreadable. Glanda, one of the 10 great saints, leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, her brows furrowed in frustration. The room was tense, the weight of their failed plan pressing heavily on them. This is troublesome, Grand Bel finally broke the silence, his voice calm but carrying a dangerous undertone. 2 of the luminaries, killed. And by none other than Demon Lord Rimmeru's so-called sisters. Damrata bowed slightly. It is as you say, Lord Razzo. Their strength was underestimated. They tore through the luminaries like they were nothing. Glanda scowled, slamming her fist against the wall. Those 2 girls are monsters. This Demon Lord Rimmeru is no ordinary enemy. He's not like the other demon lords who sit back in their castles. He moves, he plans, and now he's targeted Hinata directly. Grand Bel's eyes narrowed as he placed a hand on Mariabel's head. She didn't flinch, merely watching silently. Rimmeru Tempest is indeed unique. His power grows unnaturally fast. To gain such capable individuals as allies, or rather, family, Marina and Kumara are no mere subordinates. Damrata interjected, reports from our operatives confirm that both sisters were formidable. With his rise, their strength has only grown. And now, Hinata is walking into his domain under his challenge. Glanda pushed off the wall and stepped forward, glaring at Damrata. Why wasn't this anticipated? We planned everything perfectly, using luminaries, manipulating the church, even Hinata. Yet, everything is falling apart. And now Rimmeru has directly called her out. He's playing with us. Damrata's tone remained even. Rimmeru's unpredictability makes him a dangerous opponent. He is not bound by tradition or the usual arrogance of demon lords. He's pragmatic, which makes him all the more terrifying. Grand Bel chuckled softly, a sound devoid of warmth. Indeed. The more we learn about this Rimmeru Tempest, the more it becomes clear, he is a being beyond the normal bounds of power. Even our manipulation of Hinata may no longer be effective. Damrata folded his arms. The loss of the luminaries wasn't just a tactical failure. It has exposed a gap in our understanding of Rimmeru's forces. We expected resistance, but not to this degree. Younger sisters, they are beyond what we predicted. Grand Bel sighed, stroking Mariabel's hair as he thought. It's not only their power but their loyalty to Rimmeru. They act decisively to protect him and his nation. And now, with Hinata walking into the Tempest capital, she's walking into a trap of his design. Glanda slammed the table. Hinata won't lose. She's the strongest knight in the Holy Church. Even Rimmeru can't take her lightly. Grand Bel's gaze shifted to her, his expression cold. Do not let your personal thoughts cloud your judgment, Glanda. Even the strongest warrior can fall when they underestimate their enemy. Hinata may be strong, but she is walking into a battlefield where Rimmeru holds all the cards. Damrata spoke up again, his voice calm but laced with urgency. Lord Razzo, Rimmeru is not merely a demon lord. He has declared himself as one, yes, but his actions are those of a ruler. He has the loyalty of dragons, archdemons, and countless other monsters who would die for him without hesitation. His rise has shaken even the hierarchy of the demon lords. Guy Crimson himself has recognized Rimmeru's power. That alone should concern us. Grand Bel nodded, his expression darkening. Yes, Guy Crimson, the oldest and most powerful of the demon lords. If he recognizes Rimmeru, it means the rest of the world must tread carefully. Even we cannot afford to miscalculate further. Mariabelle's gaze finally flickered to Grandbelle, but she remained silent, a faint smirk playing on her lips as though enjoying the unfolding chaos. Glanda's tone softened slightly as she spoke. What about Hinata? She's going to fight him, but the odds aren't in her favor. Grandbelle closed his eyes, deep in thought. Hinata is an excellent warrior and a cunning strategist. However, her emotions may cloud her judgment. Rimmeru's challenge is deliberate. He knows her weaknesses. Damrata added, there's also the matter of Shizu Izawa. Rumors are surfacing that Rimmeru may have connections to her, Hinata's former teacher. If that's true, it could shake her resolve. Rimmeru may exploit this. Glanda clenched her fists. It's too much. Hinata is strong, but Rimmeru isn't fighting fair. Grandbelle leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. If Rimmeru defeats Hinata, and it's likely he will, it will change everything. The church's influence will falter. The Western nations will begin to see Tempest not as a threat but as an unstoppable force. And we will lose all leverage. Damrata's voice grew serious. Then what do we do, Lord Razo? If Hinata falls, our plans to manipulate the church and the Holy Empire of Lubelius will crumble. Grandbelle's cold smile returned. We adapt. Hinata's failure, while regrettable, can still serve a purpose. We can use her defeat to further paint Rimmeru as a threat to humanity. Fear is a powerful weapon. As the fire crackled and the shadows deepened, the conspirators knew one thing. The world was changing, and Rimmeru Tempest was at the center of it. Whether he was a demon lord, a ruler, or something more, one fact remained, he was a force they could no longer ignore. And as Hinata rode toward her confrontation with Rimmeru, the seeds of fear and uncertainty were already taking root in the hearts of those who once thought themselves untouchable. To be continued.